good lovelies. Hopefully you're having a great morning or afternoon whenever you're watching this so far. So yesterday we did some review on this unit. We've done so far, we reviewed fractions, we reviewed equivalent fractions, and then comparing fractions. Today we're going to review, we're actually going to start reviewing decimals, and then how do I go from fractions to decimals or decimals to fraction. Very short today, and it's an easy topic too, and I think most of us really enjoyed this part of the unit when we were back in the good old days when we were in school. But, okay, before we get into the two review topics, we need to make sure we remember decimals and what decimals mean or where they are found in a number. So, and I'll write a big number down so we can look at it. So, okay. Now, first I'm just going to review everything. Forget this for now. Forget this is not here. Right? Actually, let me just erase it. Let's just review this part. Okay. How do we say this? I'm sure you remember how to say this. This is 1,398,732, right? And we know this because we know the place values. And this topic of this unit is all you really need to know is place values. So hopefully you remember the place value of these. So say with me. I know I'm not there, but say with me. So this is ones. This was tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000, and million. And that's what we stopped. That was first unit back in September. That's what you should definitely already remember. Now, in this unit, we introduced decimals, right? And it was basically, because anything we needed to introduce what we call a decimal point, right? A decimal represents, basically, it's like think of it like a gate. It's telling us that anything on this side of the gate, or the decimal, means it's a whole. So for example, 732, if I had, I'm just going to look at 732 right now, forget this. If I have 732 sheets of paper, that means I have full 732 sheets of paper. That doesn't mean some are ripped up, some are half, some are quarter. No, it means they're full, whole sheets of paper. I have 732 of them. Even if I had just two of them, that means I have two whole sheets, right? They're not half, they're full sheets. But that's anything on the left side. Anything on the right of the decimal, or this gate, means it is less than 1, right? Just like fractions, it means it's part of a whole. Decimal is the same thing, it's part of a whole. So if I had, anything on this side tells me it is less than 1. It's never one whole. So, and let's review that. Let's see if you remember, hopefully you remember, maybe some of you or most of you remember the place values. So that one we know is a decimal. Okay, that's great. What place value comes after the decimal? Do we remember? And it's, if you know these one, that helps. It is tenths, right? Do you remember? And this was a fun time in our class when we would just exaggerate the all the sounds, right? Tenths. So the first one, so it's decimal, then it's tenths. Not once. A few of you used to think that we just reverse and it's once. This is ones, once. Tens, tenths. Hundreds, hundredths. No. It is, you just don't have a once. So the first one is tenths, then what comes after? Hundredths. I feel like some of you are saying it with me. I'm always hoping that you guys are like, when I'm teaching this, that you guys are like kind of answering to me. I'm pretending. Right now I'm looking at my living room, but I'm always imagining that you're actually answering me. So like, so grade 5, what would this be? And in my mind, I'm imagining you guys saying thousands, because that's thousands. It may not be true, which is fine. Thousands. Okay? You need to know this, or remember this. You need to know the place values, because nothing from today will make sense if you don't remember the place values. This is tenths, hundredths, thousands. That needs to be memorized, just like by now. And of course, everyone knows this is ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. That's memorized because you've done so much practice with it. You need to memorize these place values. So the decimal, tenths, hundreds, thousands. Decimal, tenths, hundreds, thousands. Decimal, tenths, just memorize that. And now, if this is like, holy moly, I don't remember this at all, Miss Mavish, you need to pause this video right now, go back to the first, when we first learned this in our notebook, and review your notes, because I'm not going to teach this again. But that's what you do. You need to remember the place values. Now that you know your place values, we can go on to the two topics of today. First is when we're going from decimals to fractions. And then obviously the second one will be going from fractions to decimals. So how can I go from a decimal to a fraction? And this is easy. So let's say, I think this one was really easy for a lot of us. If I have 0.9, that's my decimal. How do I make that into a fraction? Now, I'll set up my fraction. We know a fraction always has a line, a numerator, and denominator. Now, step 1, you take the number, right? What is my number right now? Obviously 0 is nothing. You take the number, which is 9, so 9, okay? Then you see what is the place value of the last digit. So what is the place value of this 9? So again, hopefully you remember, what is the place value right after the decimal? And hopefully you're saying it with me, tenths. So because it's tenths, you put a 10, right? Let's use the same example, and I'm doing this on purpose. 0.09. Now, very similar, but now I've got an extra place value. So it's going to be the same thing. Again, let me set up my fraction. So what is this decimal into a fraction? Same thing, I'm going to take my number. Okay, my number is still 9. Is the same numerator. But what place value is the 9 in now? So now it's not in the tenths, it's in the hundredths, right? Because this is the tenths, right? Decimal point, tenths, hundredths. So now I have to put 100. Do you see why we did that? Because it's what place value of the last number that we just looked at? 100. So 9/100. Okay? Then we've got 0, let's do one more, 0.09. Again, similar number, same number actually, but different place value. So again, I'm going to put 9, but what place value is the last digit in? Not the third, not the second, just the last digit. So tenths, hundredths, thousandths. See the difference? I'm doing this on purpose. I'm doing this back to back on purpose because I want you to be able to see that based on where it lies in the place value, that doesn't change my numerator, but it definitely changes my denominator, which it did, right? That's if I have decimals. Let's do a few more before we go the other way around. Let's see if I've got, let's do 0.973. What would this be as a fraction? Again, step 1, you just take your whole number and you put it as your numerator. Then to find out your denominator, you just look at the last place value. So decimal, I've got tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Excellent. Right, easy enough. Let's do one more. Actually, just tap that. 18. Once again, I put my number on the top, and then what is the place value of the last digit? Happens to be tenths, hundredths. There we go. And a quick trick for you to check is, let's say I thought maybe I was rushing, a lot of my kids rush. You know exactly who you are. You were rushing and you just put 10. Double check. Let's use some of our application and our common sense. 18/10. Have we ever seen a fraction like this? Now, in grade 6 and when you move forward, that you can still work with that, but as of now, in grade 5, have we ever seen the numerator be greater than the denominator? No, we haven't, right? So that tells you, oh, you know what, I must have done something wrong, because we know that it should be hundredths. Okay? That's when I have a decimal and I wanted to make it a fraction. Easy enough, right? All it is you put the number on top, you determine what the place value of the last digit is, and then that becomes your denominator. Now, what if I'm going from a fraction to a decimal? So the other way around. Same thing, but just other way around. Fraction to a decimal. Okay, so that means, and hopefully you'll remember this rule, but we had this only one rule. There's not really steps, but there was one very important rule, that my denominator has to be what? It has to be either 10, 100, or 1,000. It can't be anything else for me to compare and make it into decimal. So, for example, let's do some. If I have 1/10, what would that be as a decimal? And right away, I can always set up my decimal. I know it'll always be 0 decimal something. I can always set it up, right? Just like we set up the fraction, we put a line to set up the stage. We can always set it up. Now, when I have 1 over 10, let me just double check my rule. Is my denominator one of these? Correct, it is, it's a 10, so I can make this a decimal. Now, your rule is to put the number next to the decimal, that's all. But it depends, so now maybe I'll do this. I know that this is 1, and I can check because the last place value should be my denominator. So what place value is the 1 in? The tenths, hence it matches. Because, and the reason I'm saying this is, what if I had 1 over 100? What would that be as a decimal? Because once again, you might think, oh, that's your decimal 1. But it's not. Why? What place value do I need? I need hundredths. So my 1 needs to be in the hundredths place value. That needs to match, right? Hundredths place value. Tenths, hundredths, I have hundredths. So it's not the same thing. And then the same thing if I had 1 over 1,000. Same thing, again, I would have 1. But because my place value needs to be in the thousands, the 1 needs to be in the thousands, that means I need to put 2 zeros before the 1, because that's tenths, hundredths, thousands. Then it matches. Does that make sense? So understanding, once again, as long as you know your place values, you know exactly where the decimal is going to be. Let's do a few more. Let's say if I have 9 over 10. What would that be? Again, I know I could put 0.9 because I put the number and the tenths matches the tenths. I think that's easy. So it's really, really easy if my denominator is already 10, 100, or 1,000. Obviously, we know sometimes that won't be the case because what if I have 19 over 20 and I need to make this into a decimal? Now, remember, my rule doesn't apply, right? It's 10, 100, 1,000. I need to figure out, I need to change my denominator. So my denominator needs to either be 10, 100, or 1,000. Now, how do I choose? Do I just jump to 10 or 100 or 1,000? Easy way I told my kids is just look at what the next one is. So 20, what comes after 20? Does 10 come after 20? No. 20, what comes next? Because 10 has already gone. 100 comes next. So easier one is always just to look at what the next value is. Happens to be 100. So 20 times what is 100? And this you know from yesterday, right? Equivalent fractions. So 20 times what equals 100? This is your mental math. 20 times what is 100? 5. So if I do it to the bottom, I have to do it to the top. So 19 times 5 is 95, but obviously if you need to do your traditional multiplication to double check, 9 times 5 is 45. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 is 9, okay? In case you need to do that, which is fine, just make sure you do double check. It's always better to double check. Then once you're done that, then it's easy. Then we know I write down the number, and I put a decimal, and then I can check. My last place value needs to be 100, and is it in the hundredths? Tenths, hundredths. That is correct. And then you're done. Let's do one more, and then we're pretty much done. Let's say I've got, let's say 3 over 4. So now, right away, you probably noticed that Miss Mavish says my denominator needs to be 10, 100, or 1,000. It's not. And Miss Mavish also said just go to the next one. So the next one happens to be 10, okay, because Miss Mavish told me this, 10. So 4 times what equals 10? 4 times what equals 10? Nothing, right? There's nothing that I can multiply by 4 to give me 10. And this might happen, you just go to the next one. So if 10 doesn't work, right, then go to 100. Okay, 4 times what is 100? Because that does work. 4 times what is 100? 25. Again, your mental math. If I do it to the bottom, I have to do it to the top. So 3 times 25 is 75. Okay, and I'll do it here if you need 25 times 3, although that should be, your 25s and your 20s should be quick, right? 5 times 3 is 15, 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7, so 75. Then this part is easy. You just write down your number, and then you say, you just double check, right? My last value needs to be hundredths. It is hundredths. And that's it. That's all it is. So again, whether you're going from fractions to decimals or decimals to fraction, you just really need to know those place values, because as long as you know your place values, you know it will always match. So you need to know your tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Once you know that, today's must be really, really easy. Now, when you're done this video, and so in a few minutes, I want you to, if you're finding this really, really difficult, you don't remember it all, then you need to maybe watch this video again. This one's a really short one. And then after, go back to your notes. Go back to your notes when your teacher, whether it was me or Mr. Matt or Miss Rachel, taught you this in depth, because I'm not reteaching, I'm just reviewing, right? So I'm briefly going over, that's the sound of that. I'm briefly going over the steps. I'm going through all the steps, but I'm going in a much more faster pace. So obviously when you did in class, you learned, really you took it much more slower. So go back to your math notes and check. If this is good for you, you remember it's all coming back, then then I need you to go do the quiz for today. Very few questions, just a quick review, just to check in to make sure you do remember how to go from fractions to decimal, decimals to fraction. Okay? I have posted some extra review. You don't have to do the extra review questions. That's if you just want to do some extra practice today. But it's not mandatory, but the quizzes are mandatory. You have to do the quizzes, okay? So when you finish this, do some extra practice if you want to, just to get some more review. It's always good to do more. But if you just 100% knew this, it was like you never forgot anything, then you're ready for the quiz and you can do the quiz. Okay? Message us as always if you have any questions, and then I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.